Also, so what are the products of each of the steps? Where do we make carbon dioxide? Where do we make ATP? But again, I obviously haven't put the actual enzymes up there, so you're not responsible for that. Now, if you remember back from this first slide, and as I've mentioned throughout, our primary source of fuel and the formation of ATP is our carbohydrates, or our carbohydrates. Primary source is carbohydrates. Proteins can be brought in from other sources, all right, and we can use fats. So we'll look at that a little bit more detail. We might have time today, but probably not until Tuesday. But this next slide, and on page 64, shows what we do with excess glucose. So let's say that this morning for breakfast you had 10 pancakes with syrup and ice cream and orange juice and hash browns and 3 pieces of toast with jam and coffee and sugar. You had an overload of carbs and your glucose levels spiked. All right, as we'll see on Tuesday, as we talked about with case studies yesterday, that's going to cause your insulin levels obviously to go up and increase the uptake of glucose by your cells, including the liver. And so the liver, remember this reaction here is reversible, but with high levels of glucose, we store it as glycogen. And then you don't feel very good after that breakfast. You're not hungry at all, so you don't eat until about 2 o'clock. Well, by 11, your glucose levels have fallen, and you haven't eaten yet again. So these reactions now go into reverse, and in the liver we can take off that last or first phosphate and release glucose into the blood. Okay? So this process, and we'll talk about the hormones on Tuesday, but this process of forming glucose to glycogen. Make that a little arrow. Well, first of all, starting with glycolysis, we have a whole bunch of G words. So glycolysis is just the breakdown of glucose. Okay, glucose being broken down to ATP, water, heat, and carbon dioxide. Glycogenesis is when we have excess glucose and we form glycogen. This would be a polysaccharide. So glycogenesis, the formation of glycogen. Then if we take that, glycogenesis, and when we take that and break it down back to glucose, we call it glycogenolysis, or the breakdown of glycogen. You would think glucogenolysis, but it's glycogenolysis. Or glucogenesis. It's glycogenolysis, and this is the reverse, glycogen to glucose. So this would, we have the 2 enzymes, okay, insulin is going to increase glycogenesis, glucagon would increase glycogenolysis, increasing this would happen in what we call the post-absorptive state, so more than 2 hours after you ate. Now, we have another term, unfortunately, that also starts with a G, and this is gluconeogenesis. So this is utilizing amino acids and fats instead of glucose. that are listed on the bottom of page 64 are the ones that we will talk about on Tuesday that deal with gluconeogenesis. For example, growth hormone. One of the case studies, I don't think anybody signed up for it, and I'm not sure how I listed it this year, is about a guy who's using steroids, anabolic steroids. He loses weight, he builds protein mass, but after about 8 months of heavy use, he develops diabetes. Well, growth hormone, again, you don't have to write this down because we'll talk about it on Tuesday, but growth hormone switches the body's use of fuel from glucose to lipids. And so since you're not using glucose, blood levels of glucose rise. Stimulates insulin release. Over a long period of time, that leads to diabetes. Okay. Fats are used instead for fuel. So it triggers the activation of lipase inside our adipose cells, and you have breakdown of triglycerides and release of fatty acids. So fatty acid levels in the blood go up. It increases protein building, so it's great for bodybuilding. And so we're taking amino acids out of the blood and making new proteins. And so growth hormone results in a drop of amino acids in the blood and a rise of fatty acids and a rise of glucose. So that's how we're going to look at each of these hormones and see how they affect the blood levels of those three different types of fuel sources. So page 66, and if we're looking at gluconeogenesis, lipids, if we're looking at triglycerides like we did yesterday, are going to be broken down into glycerol and fatty acids. Okay. Already mentioned, glycerol can come into our glucose metabolism as glyceraldehyde phosphate and broken down to pyruvic acid and go into our citric acid cycle. The fatty acids undergo a process known as beta oxidation. Remember, fatty acids are long chains of carbons. It could be 18 to 20 or more. And so beta oxidation is a process by which these are reduced, these are broken down to 2 carbon molecules. Where did we have 2 carbon molecules in glucose processing? That was our acetyl group. So fatty acids broken down into these glucose molecules by beta oxidation, then release the acetyl groups that can go directly into our citric acid cycle. If too many of those are produced, they're converted to ketones, and we talked about ketoacidosis a few times in metabolic acidosis. But this image shows you how fats can be introduced to as a fuel source. This is just a diagram that includes both fats and proteins. Okay. So again, if we have with fats, we go into oxidation, produce fatty acids. Glycerol can go directly into glycolysis, fatty acids into the acetyl-CoA, and amino acids can go into either of those as pyruvic acid or in our acetyl-CoA group. So that's just kind of a concept map, if you will, illustrating gluconeogenesis. And these are just other views of the same. This one to me is a little easier to follow than the previous one. It's a little bit clearer. Okay. All right. So I'm going to summarize here, and we'll start with. We're going to come back to metabolic states at the very beginning on Tuesday. But let's just summarize these terms right here. Most of you that have taken a nutrition class, unless you've forgotten everything, all of you, and some of you who haven't, are familiar with the term calorie counting. A calorie with a little c, and that's everything up here is uppercase, but a calorie with a little c is defined as a measurement of energy or heat. All right, so this is the amount of energy, and it's measured in a component called a British thermal unit. Required to raise the temperature of 1 ml of water, that's a cubic centimeter, 1 degree Celsius. That's a little calorie. That's a little c. A kilocalorie, also written with an uppercase C, is 1,000 times that. So can we say it's the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 ml 1,000 degrees? No. Okay, because we can't get water higher than 100. That's because it starts to boil. Okay, it required pressures. So it's the amount of energy required to raise 1,000 mils, 1 degree, or 1 liter. So amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1,000 mils, or 1 liter, 1 degree. That's what you see on packages. All right, where it says a slice of bread has 90 calories, or a small banana has 90 calories, or a cup of Haagen-Dazs ice cream has 900. Well, I guess it's not a cup, the pints. It's more like 1,200. I've looked. Or the new laws that say that restaurants have to tell you how many calories you see it, for a sandwich or a cup of soup or whatever. Those are in kilocalories. They use an instrument called a bomb calorimeter. They actually put it inside an oven and burn it and measure the heat that's released. They also know, there's standards that they know they use 1 cup of flour and all that kind of stuff. Now you guys know the nutritional components. So 1 gram of carbs is 4 calories. And 1 gram of protein is 4 calories, and 1 gram of fat is 9. All right? So, the next term on our list there is basal metabolic rate. This is in reference to the minimum amount of energy that your body requires to stay alive. Not to even think about staying alive, just to stay alive. All right, so your heart beating, the brain action potentials required to keep your cells alive, not saying 1 + 1 is 2, or I wish I could get up, or any other thought processes, is your basal metabolic rate. Okay. Now, kind of the number thrown out there for the average person is 1,200 kilocalories. People change, and hormones affect what that basal metabolic rate would be. Okay? So some people will swear that they take in 900 calories a day and go around their daily activity and don't lose weight. All right? Other individuals will say, I take in 2,500 calories a day and I lose weight. So it's variable. Your body adjusts to the amount that it obtains. It can become more efficient or less efficient. I told you about the endocrinologist that I went to see a long time ago. that said the only way to lose weight was to diet and exercise. And you've all known people, my youngest son is, well, not now because he has put on some muscle, but when he was 11, he could suck in his tummy and, I mean, you literally could span the front to his back and like that far. Okay, he still is really, really skinny. Both of my boys are skinny. My daughter has her husband, not her husband's, my daughter has my husband's build. She's 5'5", and is 134 pounds. She's slender, it's muscle mass. She calls her thighs thunder thighs, but they're just very muscular. You go like that and they don't move. Okay, it's from her horseback riding and football conditioning and stuff. I had a classmate in nursing school who would drink milkshakes every single night and couldn't gain weight. So there's obviously people have different metabolic rates. Much of that is, you know, affected hormonally and is changed and reset by the hypothalamus. All right, what's the difference between malnutrition and malnourishment? Okay, so mal means bad. Both of them are off. So nutrition means you're not getting the proper, you may not have the adequate minimum daily requirement of proteins or your vitamins or iron or something like that. All right, you might be getting a sufficient number of calories, but if they all came from a milkshake or McDonald's, all right, or just a big bowl of rice, white rice, and nothing else, you would have adequate nourishment, but not enough nutrition. Okay? Now let's say that you drink 2 cups of Ensure a day, or my protein drinks. That's 300 calories. But then I take a vitamin pill. So I've got all of my vitamins and my minerals, and that's high in protein. Might not have the carbs. So I've got all of my nutrients, but not enough of the calories. That's malnourishment. Okay? Typically, if you're malnourished, you also have malnutrition. But you can have malnutrition and not be malnourished. Nourishment is a calorie base. Nutrition is the proper amount of proteins and carbs and fats and vitamins and minerals that your body needs. So I'll leave you, or a few minutes early, but I'll leave you with a question. Most of you probably come up with the answer before you leave, but we'll talk about it on Tuesday. Summer break comes, and you've decided to sign up for an adventure. You're flying on a plane over the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. Your pilot is a 90-year-old man. Okay?
Shouldn't go on the plane the first time.
His son weighs about, I don't know, 570 pounds. It's not muscle. Also on board is a 29-year-old woman who just won the Olympic, I don't care, whatever. She's an Olympic gold medalist. Runner. Okay, she's a long distance runner. She won the women's marathon. And she has with her 2-month-old son. Okay? Not surprisingly, with the 90-year-old pilot, your plane crashes. Everybody survives, but you only have a day-and-a-half supply of food and water. So which one is going to survive? Well, of course, you're obviously going to survive. But which of the others is going to be able to survive the longest? Okay? So we'll talk about it when we get back. I'll see you on Tuesday.
If he can move.
Remember, your take-homes are due on Tuesday. By the end of the day, you send them to me on the computer, last minute or whatever. I'm about halfway grading the 5 that have been turned into me already. So those are taking a little bit longer because